Hey everyone, so recently I tried out the new Overwatch Classic mode in Overwatch 2 in the last 2 days, I believe. And as someone who only played Overwatch 2, I was super curious. I was wondering why people keep saying that Overwatch 1 was peak both in and out of competitive play. So I'm gonna dive in and see if there's really a difference or if it's just the nostalgia talking. Alright, so let's kick things off with something that really stands out. Roll queue.
What is that? What the f*** is that? What is that, Private Pile?
For those who didn't know, in Overwatch 1, players didn't have the restrictions that we do now. You were able to pick multiple players of the same role. Imagine this, 2 people playing D.Va and Reinhardt while the rest of the team fills in with Widowmakers, 2 Torbjorns, and a Mercy. Sounds pretty chaotic, right? But it worked in its own way, because it gave teams a lot of flexibility. But this is where things started to get messy though. The biggest issue? It was the lack of support players.
Somebody go healers.
Lol, no kid. The only reason you play Overwatch is because you desperately try to escape silver. You f***ing bitch. You should.
Sure, this dynamic meant less pressure on other roles because you had extra peel potential from multiple tanks or DPS. But the real problem came from that one lone support player who had to carry the weight of keeping everyone alive. If your team didn't decide to play a second support, the lack of that second source of healing completely changed the game, and it forced that single support player to burn out quickly. Survivability in 6v6 matches became a complete nightmare, and I do not want to go back to that. Now, you could argue that the lack of a healing passive in Overwatch 1 pushed skill expression by forcing players to rely more on map layout and positioning to avoid damage. And while I do see the appeal, that's where I gotta disagree with you. Sure, evasion was important, but when your tanks were forced to be the frontline initiators, things started to get tricky. As a tank, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. You're either dying trying to get those crucial teamfights started, or you're forced to retreat and lose map control. But hey, I gotta give credit where credit is due. Overwatch 1 definitely put a heavy emphasis on map knowledge, and the Wrecking Ball players, I can tell they were absolutely a nightmare to deal with. And look, I get it. Being able to play whatever you want in a casual setting is fine, and it definitely makes for fun, chaotic moments. But when we step into competitive play, where elo problems and lack of role locking are real issues, it's hard to ignore the fact that not playing support is almost just like throwing the game. Alright, now let's dive into something fun. Peel potential and health pools. And don't worry 6v6ers, this one's for you. So when I was playing 6v6, I did notice the health pools felt a lot better. Tanks with 500 health? Thank you, I'll take that. Meanwhile, DPS and supports were normally sitting at 200 health or lower, which is a lot less forgiving, but here's the thing. With everyone having solid health pools, it made a huge difference in how fights were able to play out. Tanks especially, they were the shining example here. Take dive tanks like D.Va. If she was going to deal with squishies, your Reinhardt could just sit back and do his thing, essentially being the housewife and protecting the team. Score 1 for the boss girls, eh?
Metro Boomin, make it boom.
Don't even come at me, Ryan players. I know some of you love playing Reinhardt like that. Don't lie to me, bro. The health pools in Overwatch 1 really helped with peeling for your DPS and even your supports, if you were lucky enough to have some. If your squishy got absolutely hammered by that D.Va, you could get a tank to peel back and buy them some time. But now in Overwatch 2, it's more about keeping everyone alive with their heals. Sure, it definitely works, but the pendulum shifted. In Overwatch 1, the true supports were your DPS players. Everyone had more agency in controlling the game's tempo. You could decide when and how to change the flow of a fight, and it wasn't all in the supports or your one tank. Now, if you compared that to Overwatch 2, the game's meta mostly hinges towards dive and poke, but the real power lies with supports or more often the singular tank. This is where the rose-tinted glasses did start to kick in. Blizzard specifically changed team compositions, reducing it to one tank instead of two to fix queue times. When they did that, They had to tweak health pools to optimize them for Overwatch 2's new direction, 5v5. Now one tank can single-handedly control the pace of the game. If your backline is getting wrecked, it's on that tank to make a move and change things. With their health pools, they've got a bit more staying power and can get back to hold point after making a play. But this is the catch though. Putting more emphasis on the tank to change the game with a single decision, it puts way more pressure on them than the others. If your tank isn't pulling their weight or fails to adjust, yeah, good luck, Gumball, you better watch yourself. Alright everyone, here's the next one, and after this I'll get into what I'd change. Now let's talk about a role's purpose. When I was playing Overwatch Classic, I really couldn't figure out what my purpose was, especially when I played as tank or DPS. Take tanks for example, was I supposed to play like a DPS and dive in, or was I supposed to stay back and be the shield bot? It was kind of unclear in Overwatch Classic. Maybe it's because I'm too used to the tank role in Overwatch 2, but honestly, what am I supposed to be doing? Do I focus on attacking the other tanks, or should I dive into the backline and take out those squishies? I often found myself pushing too far without a shield and then boom, getting hit by Widowmakers and a Hanzo popping scatter arrows all over my face. Not exactly fun. Whereas Overwatch 2, I'd charge it and start smacking squishies all around with the hammer. Then when it came to DPS, it was even more confusing. Do I peel for my team when they're getting absolutely washed, or do I just focus on shooting the people who are shooting at me? It was tough to understand the role, and the complexity of it kinda scared me off. I ended up gravitating towards playing tank, because hey, at least I could understand the glorified DPS part of it. Something my caveman brain could handle. Like just... Give me big hammer and I smash. Woo woo woo. Thanks. You know what I'm saying? Now support, oh boy. Support just felt completely pointless in classic Overwatch. Everyone seemed to prefer peeling over healing. And like I mentioned earlier, the lack of healing stream means your team's survivability takes a complete nosedive. But I did notice something interesting, it's that Mercy was by far the most popular pick. And I was wondering why. But then I remembered, her insane healing numbers are able to patch up tanks and DPS without any issues, due to the fact that the health pools and stuff were all balanced out, where support would have, less stress, or specifically Mercy. Whereas in Overwatch 2's meta, Mercy wasn't the best, honestly, because her heals are a bit too slow. But we all know the real reason was the 5-man revive. You know, that's the Mercy dream, right? Alright, now let's get into some team composition. This is where things start to get tricky. I can't say one is strictly better than the other, but here's what I observed and the differences between the two games. In Overwatch 2, you mostly play a single composition archetype. For example, for a poke comp, you'd go Sigma, Zen, Mercy, Widowmaker, and Torbjorn. With a brawl comp, Reinhardt, Reaper, Bastion, Brigitte, and Ana. And with a dive comp, you go Winston, Kiriko, Lifeweaver, Genji, and Tracer. In Overwatch 2, counterplay is much more straightforward. Brawl counters dive, dive counters poke, and poke counters brawl. It's clean, and while it's simple to grasp, it's also much more stricter on each person. But in Overwatch 1, with 2 tanks, you had a lot more flexibility. You could run 2 archetypes at once. For example, you could go dive brawl with Rein, D.Va, Soldier, Genji, Lucio, and Mercy, or you could mix it up with a dive poke comp, running D.Va, Zenyatta, Mercy, Torbjorn, and Widowmaker. Maybe even throw in a Hawk for some good measure. The flexibility was great, but it came at the cost of less strict counterplay. This flexibility made it harder to predict what would actually work, especially when new additions like Orisa and Sigma weren't around to push the emphasis on poke. As you can see, in Overwatch 2, Orisa is now a poke tank. Ridiculous, right? Anyways, with that said, I think the problem with Overwatch 1 was that it lacked the focus and clarity that we see in Overwatch 2. Yes, it was more flexible, but it was also a bit of a mess at the time, especially with less emphasis on specific roles and strategies. Now here's the final conclusion, how I would change Overwatch. Now here we are, and we're at the final stretch team. After all we've gone through and considering all the stuff I've talked about, I bet you're wondering, isn't Overwatch Classic just for fun, and what would you actually change since you've been yapping this whole time? First of all, ouch dude, that hurt. Touché though. But now let's talk about what I would do to fix Overwatch 2. This conclusion is important because 6v6 should be a wake-up call to the Overwatch 2 balance team. They need to understand what they're doing right now isn't keeping the Overwatch 2 player base happy. And when the player base isn't happy, they stop spending money, and when they stop spending money, well, good luck with that, right? In video games, your player base is your biggest asset. You can't keep that in check. Then you're just a pump and dump trying to make a quick buck before jumping ship when it all goes wrong. Now with that out of the way, let's get into what I would do to make the game work. First point, roll queue. What I would do with roll queue is definitely make it 6v6, no question. 6v6 takes the pressure off of everyone, especially the tank, who is supposed to be controlling the game's speed and tempo. With 2 tanks, you can have each one peel for the other. This means that if your Amatra is getting rolled by a Reaper and a Moga trying to focus him down, your other tank is able to step in to help you. You'd have someone to cover you when an Ana tries to sleep anti and ping you to death. It takes the entire game from being flipped on its head by one bad move and makes it more manageable. So yeah, I'd make Overwatch 2 6v6, but still keep role and single character locking. You're locked to 2 tanks, 2 supports, and 2 DPS. Queue times might be a bit longer, but trust me, it'll be worth the wait. You'll have a better, more balanced game. Effective healing, peeling, and less of the random bullshittery that ruins all your fun. Less chaos and more strategy equals more fun. Second point, health pools. Now, I definitely love the 6v6 health pools. They are the most balanced thing I've ever seen in Overwatch. Tanks at 500 health, DPS at 200 below, and supports at 200 or below. This is the setup that puts the emphasis back on DPS, to peel for supports and keep the front line under control for the tanks. The supports would have their job, which is to create healing opportunities and hold down the fort. Tanks are front and center, controlling the space and seeing everything that comes at the team. The passive healing would stay so supports don't get stressed out too much. They still have to work, but it'd be manageable. DPS wouldn't be forced to worry about their tank or support getting diffed every second. It's about high risk, high reward playstyles. That still rewards skill and positioning, but with a heavier emphasis on communication. Tanks should be calling out plays and the rest of the team needs to follow suit. This is a team-based game and communication is key. And also, we need to stop with the bullcrap passives. The knockback resistance for tanks, that was a joke. Tanks don't need that. You've got a second tank there to help you, so you can protect the team if things go south. You can control space, stall the point, and keep things safe for your team while the other tank can come back and rejoin the action. The real skill expression should come from effective communication, not from relying on passive abilities to patch up issues. Overwatch is about team play. Make it about that, Blizzard. Wake up and smell the coffee. Your community is down in the dumps and they're not giving you money because you're more concerned with making quick profits rather than a consistent stream of income. Those rich fat cats in charge should be thinking long term. Instead of treating the player base like disposable income, make the game work for them. Blizzard needs to create a system that builds a lasting player base rather than just squeezing out a quick buck before moving on to the next thing. A business's lifeblood is cash, and customers vote with their wallets. So if Blizzard wants that vote, they need to offer something the community actually wants. Because someone who's looking for an RPG isn't going to pick up a shooter, and a player who's tired of constant changes and microtransactions will not be hooked by the next shiny update. Players are smarter than that. They want substance, not just flashy distractions. Anyways everyone, I know the 6v6 game mode was just for fun, but it still serves as a wake-up call, sort of like a cautionary tale. You saw how long quick play queues were when 6v6 joined as an event. It shows that 6v6 had some elements that Blizzard bottled up, threw into the ocean, and just let it drift off into nothing. Even though it may not seem like it, there's still hope for this game. Blizzard just needs to focus on their roots. But honestly, I don't think Blizzard will listen. But still, I'm hoping the viewers who just watched will. Anyways, thanks everyone for watching, and God bless.